Hi, my name's Adam Rhodes of Anaplan, and today I'd like to walk you through the retail branch planning model that we have that really focuses on retail banking and covers off a couple of elements really. It covers off quite nicely methods for forecasting net interest income with a branch network focus. And then it also covers off decision making around branch closures and the impact that that can have on the P&L. So first of all, we're at this sort of initial P&L. I can see I've got all of my usual P&L lines here on this grid at the top, split out over time, so I can see that trend. I've got my income lines, my net interest income around my maturity and non-maturity products and any fees and commissions. I then have the cost element broken down, so things like staff costs, premises costs, and so on. And we've got some restructuring costs that we'll touch on a little bit later when we start to look at the impact of branch closures and things like redundancy payments. I've also got charts down here. So at the bottom, I can see I've got a breakdown of my total income split by operating profit and expenses. And over on the right-hand side, I also have a split here showing me the different scenarios that I'm currently running. So I can see the red line there is my base forecast. And now I'm running what we see as a selected version. And from the top, I can see that's my current forecast. So key premise of Anaplan, the ability to spin off different versions, different scenarios, and compare them with one another in real time. The other thing to note about this screen is that we've got this drop down here with the branch network. So here we're looking at a UK example, and I can toggle up and down this hierarchy and see how the numbers differ as I browse up and down. So from this starting point, what this model allows us to do is to jump into a driver-based mechanism for calculating each of the lines on this P&L. So the first thing that we're actually going to do in this example is to focus on the costs. So for the start, what I want to do is look at the staff costs. And there are a couple of elements to this. We've got strategic headcount planning, so the ability to set some top-down targets and cascade them through the organisation structure. And then we get into more the operational workforce planning, where we're down at a more granular bottom-up planning level. So if I first of all focus on strategic headcount planning, this takes me to a dashboard that allows me to visualize how I'm going to take headcount targets and cascade them down through the organization. So this top grid looks at FTE by country. If I click on England there, it's going to break this down so that at the next level I can see the regions within England. So I now see East England, London and Midlands. And if I click on East England, the grid below will filter and it's only going to show the branches, the retail branches that exist within that East England region. I have various KPIs across the top, so all of these KPIs are being calculated in real time as I'm making decisions, and you can see I've got this split out by the regions across, in this case, across the UK, so I can see England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So what I can do here is for England, I could maybe set a high level target, so let's say our target for FTE is actually going to be 140 rather than 150. When I make that change, it's automatically spreading that information across the remainder of the regions. So I can see I've got my 140 and I now get a variance back to my end of year forecast. I can carry on through this process. So if I look at England there, 140, and come down to the next level, I can see that 140 has now been applied as a region FTE. But I've applied here overrides, so I can toggle around in here and say, well, actually, for East England, I'm going to make that 48 rather than 45. And when I do that, we see the peers of London and Midlands have uplifted. So they've been adjusted accordingly in order to make sure that we still hit that 140 target. And if I drop this down to 42, we'll see them increase. So you can see that we're making sure that as we carry on through this allocation process through our branch network, that we're always tying back to that top-down target of 140 that we set in the first step. Let me just push that back to 45. When we come down to the bottom then, as we're looking in East England, we've got our adjustments that have been made here. We can then apply branch overrides, or we can even hold the start position through to the end of the year. So here, for example, we can see that Huntingdon High Street, the start position was 7. Currently we're calculating 8. Well, if I click the Boolean here to enable that through to the end of the year, it's going to apply that 7. and it's going to adjust the peers accordingly. Now, because I've got overrides here that I've set on Cambridge and Ely, all it's been able to adjust is Bury, which is uplifted by 1. But if I drop this override down on Ely, what we'll see is that Bury is now uplifted to 13. So it's taken the difference in order to make sure that we still tie back to the region override target. So that's just a nice example of showing how we can run a nice waterfall allocation to push those high-level targets all the way through the Anaplan model. From there, what I now want to do is to look at my detailed workforce plan. And if we focus on Cambridge there, we can see we applied this override of 11 FTE. So when I come to my detailed workforce plan and focus in on Cambridge, so the moment we're at East England, let me just change my drop down here to look at Cambridge St Andrew Street. There we can see at the top, we're getting a real-time target set. So I can see there's the 11 FTEs. I can see that I've planned to have 10 FTEs, and I'm getting a real-time variance to target. So within here now, this allows me to make very granular decisions around my workforce. I can look at individual employees. I can apply role changes. So there we've just adjusted Tom Fraser back from branch manager to assistant branch manager. If I click on Tom, we can see his financials. So as I click on each of these individuals here, they're context sensitive. They're driving the flow of data through the rest of the model. So there's his salary costs. If I set Tom back to a branch manager and apply his role change, what we'll see is that from April, so we've got the 1st of April as the effective change date for that promotion, we can now see that his salary is increased from that point forward. And that's taking these annual salary bands, these assumptions that we've uploaded on the right here. If I come back to Cambridge St Andrew Street level, we can see all of those financials rolled up to the highest level, giving me this full breakdown of employee costs. I've also got this little blue information icon on this grid, and I've got a tooltip there that's telling me that I can click on the ellipsis to add a new employee. So if I click in here, I've got this create option here and the ability to add a new employee. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to add a new to be hired, number 4. Its parent is going to be Cambridge St Andrew Street. I'm going to specify, well, let's drop this back to, let's go for 6th of August 19. And let's put in the position that they're going to fill. So maybe we need to fill an assistant branch manager role to backfill for the fact that we've promoted Tom. So I specify assistant branch manager and submit. And now I see my bottom-up FTE now meets my strategic target. So my KPIs at the top have all updated in real time. Down here, here's my TBH, there's my assistant branch manager, and it's automatically pulled in the 34.5k, and again it's picking that up from these salary assumptions. So this is showing how we can use business decisions to drive the financial impact on the P&L. And as I come back to Cambridge St Andrew Street, we'll see now the impact on the financials all rolled up at that more aggregate level. And here we can see salary costs from September are significantly higher than they were in August by virtue of the fact that we've onboarded that new FTE. So that's a little bit around how we can build up those workforce plans within the P&L. Where I wanted to go then was to come down and start looking at some of the org modelling within this model. So this is where I can take a look at my entire branch network. So here I've got a breakdown of all of my branches. I have some information about each of those branches. So is it a high street branch? Is it in city small, city large, and so on. I've got information around the number of cashier counters, the number of ATMs, digital banking kiosks. I'm also pulling through here what the average total account balances are that are held in these branches. And I can also see that I've got operating profit being pulled through. And if I just change my drop down here to be total company, all of these metrics at the top are updating in real time, so I can see what my operating profit is between my base forecast version and the current forecast that I'm currently playing around in, and I can see what that looks like over time in terms of total income. But I could toggle that and look at any of the financial metrics that I've got in here, maybe rolling it up to a total operating profit view. But in this example, what I want to focus in on is the fact that if I look at Huntingdon, I can see the operating profit is significantly lower. In fact, it's incredibly small compared to its peer branches. So what I can now start to do is think about options for closing it. So if I choose to close that branch, and we've already got a close date in here that we've specified of November 18, what I can see immediately is that in my current forecast version, so the purple line, I can see that my operating profit has dropped off from that point forwards. And in actual fact, some of the nearby branches will have seen their profit increased by virtue of them receiving that additional business. And the way we do that is by this distribution to channels piece over on the right-hand side. So what I can specify here is that on closure of the Huntingdon branch, I can specify here that 60% of the customers from that branch are going to revert, or they're going to move their business to another branch. 8% might revert to telephony banking, 13% to online, and so on. And I can see the associated balances with these changes. So if I make a change here and say that's 62%, I see the associated account balances climb, and we'll drop telephone banking down to 6%. So that's where my 7.8 in associated account balances are being rerouted to other branches. Down below that, I can then specify which branches are going to receive that business. So here we're saying Cambridge St Andrew Street will get 35% of that 7.8 million in account balances. 25% will go to Ely, 10% to Bury St Edmunds, and so on. And we can play around with these drivers. But crucially, if I come back to the beginning and back to my P&L impact, what I will see is that my P&L has been updated in real time. So here we're looking at Huntingdon High Street. I can see my selected version, my current forecast. I see the financials drop off as we head towards November. Similarly, I can see a breakdown there over time of my operating profit, my income and expenses. And obviously in the financials here, I see those drop off in November. And I also see some restructuring costs associated with the closure of the branch. If I come up here and look at Cambridge, which was one of the branches that received, I think it was 35%, we can see the impact here as well. So we start to see a bit more of a gulf as we go through 2020 by virtue of the fact that 35% of those account balances are now being managed through the Cambridge St Andrew Street branch. So this is actually now a nice segue into a bit of a connected planning story. So here we've said that for Huntingdon High Street closure, we're going to see 6% of customers revert to telephony channels, and that's where we can start to bring in other models. So here behind the scenes, I have a secondary model that focuses on contact centre planning. And what I can do here is actually look at the importing the impact of those branch closures. So if I click on this action button here to import the impact of branch closures, this model is now going to go away. It's going to talk to the retail branch planning model. It's going to see if it can find any branch closures. If it does, it's going to import the impact of those branch closures into my contact centre planning model. And that's completed. And now what I can see here, it's showing me that from November, we've closed the Huntingdon High Street branch. We think that's going to result in 378 new customers by virtue of the account balances and the average account balance. And that equates, in this case, to 1,100 calls per month and 32 calls per day. And we're simply driving those numbers by using an average calls per customer per month. So I could go in there and uplift that to 5 calls per customer per month. And what I'll see is that this 1,100 is now uplifted to 1,892. We can also see then the impact of those calls split out by hour. So using the pattern of data that we've already got in our contact centre model, we're taking the 55 calls per day and we're apportioning them back through the working day to determine what that additional demand on my contact centre would look like. And then within this model, we can come back in, we can look at our baseline forecast for inbound call volumes in the contact centre. And if I scroll right down to the bottom here to October, November, what we've got here is the ability to overlay now those calls that we've pulled in from the branch closures and sit those on top of our existing call volumes. And simply by activating that checkbox, it's going to adjust my baseline volumes and allow me to look at that demand. And this model then takes you through the whole supply-demand planning piece around contact centre. ultimately coming back to some cockpits around SLA achievement by contact center. So by day of the month, how many days have I hit my service level? And obviously behind the scenes also a view of cost. But we can go into the details of that contact center model in another session. But it's a really nice segue into how something like retail branch planning and the decisioning that's been made in here can have a knock-on impact on another part of the business, and really why those plans do need to be connected in real time. So that's a little bit around the branch planning piece. From there, this model then takes us into what I would class as the more traditional retail bank planning and forecasting, where we're down on the revenue side. So here we can look at income from current account. And here I've got two products. I've got a classic current account product and I've got a current account plus. So the difference there, the current account plus is a chargeable product. It probably includes maybe some travel insurance or such like as part of that product offering. But if I come back to Cambridge here we can see I've got my classic product, and if I click on that, I'll see my chart here is showing the difference between my base forecast and my current forecast. If I click on current account plus, I'll see how that changes. And over here on current account plus, we have an income bridge that's showing me the breakdown of the different income lines. And I can see we've got account fees coming through there because it is a chargeable product. Now, for this piece, all of this net interest income is being driven through assumptions. So behind the scenes here, we've got some assumptions management. So these are potentially global assumptions at a product level rather than a branch level. But this is where I can maintain my economic assumptions, looking at things like a Bank of England base rate, internal treasury rate, even foreign exchange rates. And then down here below that, I've got a breakdown by current account. So if I look here, let's come and look at current account, our classic current account product. I can see the percentage of closures. I get a view on interest payable percentages, percentages around interest rate receivable from customers, monthly account fees. Well, we don't have any because this is a non-chargeable product, and I'm also getting a breakdown here of overseas usage. So any fees associated with ATM withdrawals overseas and potentially also Forex implications of that. So at a very simple level, what I could come in here and do is play around with this a little bit and say, well, at the moment in January, February, March, we're down at around 3,000 GBP in terms of the average credit balance per account. But what if we were to say, well, in January, February, March, for whatever reason, that's going to be significantly higher. So I make that change. And when I now go back to my current account income analysis, what I should see is a huge spike in terms of income in January, February, March based on that increase in balances. And there we can see it. So my chart down here is showing that huge spike in income off the back of that change we just made. So a really nice way to take central assumptions and to be able to show how they can be pushed out across all of the underlying segmental products. So that's sort of focusing on the current account side. This model also goes into mortgages. So we've got a split here between existing and new book. And if I come and look at my existing book, what this is showing me is what my interest income profile looks like. And because this is my existing book, it's my closed book, I would expect to see a runoff over time, as you do see here. So I've got beginning balances. I've then got prepayments, which really alludes to overpayments, people making payments over and above their monthly mortgage payment. I've got my runoff, so that's my typical runoff, so that is my expected mortgage payments, and ultimately I'm getting to an ending balance. So I can play around with this a little bit and say, well, what if I see prepayments increase from 4% to 6%? What's that going to do? Well, as you would expect, my runoff is going to complete sooner, and I would also see a lower amount of net interest income off the back of that change. If I just toggle some of these items off so I can just look at my runoff rate, here's my existing rate. So for this particular fixed mortgage product, we're saying we expect a 2% runoff of the book. I can play around with that and uplift that to 3%. And we see that uplift from October because that's our forecasting period. Prior to that, we've got actuals, so we can't flex those. But what we can also do is something that we've factored in at the moment as a result of the current pandemic that we find ourselves in, whereby we might need to factor in mortgage holidays. So certainly in the UK, mortgage providers are offering up to a 3-month mortgage holiday. So what we've been able to do in this model is very quickly add in the impact of that. So down at the bottom, I've got 2 lines, mortgage holiday percentage and mortgage holiday deferred. And what I can do is say, well, actually in April, we're going to expect that 10% of our customers are going to take advantage of that mortgage holiday. We might see 40% in May. We may see 30% in June and 10% in July. And we can start to see that tail off. And what that's done, it's adjusted my runoff rate as a result of that. And it's also showing me how much in terms of deferred mortgage payments that's going to drive. And at the top, what it's also showing is what that means in terms of net interest income. And it's flattened my curve out a little bit so I can see and hopefully help to predict what my income is going to look like over time. So that, in essence, brings to an end this demonstration. Everything that I've done there in terms of driving costs, driving revenue from my current account and mortgage book is ultimately all coming back to that P&L analysis. And everything that I've done in here is driving the cost and the revenue on this P&L. So thank you very much for your time. If any of you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, Adam Rhodes, adam.rhodes@anaplan.com. Thanks for your time.